Don't let your partner stop you from finding your millionaire spouse. That sentence sat on the glowing screen of my phone like a knife pressed against my chest. It was written by Taylor, my partner of 4 years, and posted right in the middle of her younger sister's graduation dinner. My fingers tightened around the cold glass of the wine I hadn't even touched. Around me, laughter and clinking glasses carried on, but in my ears there was only silence. The post had a picture of the graduation hall behind her, decorated with banners and balloons, and her smile looked rehearsed. Beneath the caption, dozens of likes and comments began piling up. 4 years together. A life built under one roof. My apartment worth more than one fay, $2 million turned into a punchline for strangers on the internet. I didn't think. I just acted. I typed, "Good luck, you'll need it," and hit send. Then, still seated at that long table surrounded by her family, I changed my relationship status to single, and tagged her parents, her sister, and even her cousins. My phone buzzed like a hornet's nest. Her post vanished within minutes, but the humiliation was already carved into the evening. I tried to focus on the smell of roast beef and the shimmer of champagne bottles lined up like soldiers, but all I saw was Taylor's profile picture, and that line. Everyone kept smiling. No one dared address what had just happened. That's how betrayal works, quiet at first, then roaring in your chest. I felt alone at that table. I had helped pay for the cap and gown her sister wore tonight. I had hosted their family in my apartment countless times, cooking, pouring wine, letting them treat my place like their own. And here I was, invisible. On the table beside me, the silver keys to that very apartment lay in my pocket heavy, like a reminder of how much I had given. Taylor leaned toward me, her whisper sharp, "You humiliated me." I kept my voice steady. "You did that yourself." Her smile returned for the crowd, but her eyes were burning. She raised her glass in a mock toast with her father, who didn't look at me once. They laughed, all of them, while I sat still, tasting the metal bitterness of betrayal. But what they didn't know was that I had already begun to plan my response. I wanted to stand up right then, to shout across the hall, "This is the person you raised, someone who turns loyalty into a punchline." But instead, I pressed my hand against the envelope in my jacket. Inside was the latest mortgage statement, a reminder of whose name sat on the deed of whose sweat had paid every installment. That envelope would matter soon enough. The rest of the dinner blurred. Plates came and went, music swelled, cameras flashed. I remained quiet, the kind of quiet that chills the air around it. People avoided my eyes. When dessert arrived, small slices of cake with strawberries, someone joked about sweet beginnings. I nearly laughed. Sweet beginnings for them? Yes. For me, it was the start of war. You see, I had always lived carefully. My savings were my fortress, built brick by brick over years of 12-hour days and cautious choices. Taylor had enjoyed the fortress, but she never built it. And with one viral post, she had set it on fire. I'll explain the rest soon. This part matters. For now, remember, this humiliation breeds clarity. I saw with painful sharpness who she was and what I had become. Not a partner in her eyes, just a stepping stone towards something richer. A placeholder. So I smiled, lifted my own glass at last, and whispered under my breath, "Obstacle removed. Tell me where you're watching from and hit subscribe. We need to talk about families and money." When I walked back into my apartment that night, the air was heavy with silence. The graduation program still stuck out of my jacket pocket, its golden tassel brushing against my side. Taylor was waiting in the middle of the living room, arms crossed, eyes swollen but hard. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone," she spat. "No," I said, calmly dropping my keys into the bowl by the door, the metallic clink echoing. "You did that yourself." Her face shifted from hurt to fury. She followed me into the kitchen, where I reached for a bottle of water. "It was just a post. People joke all the time." "Not when you're living in someone's $1 million apartment and calling them a placeholder," I answered, twisting the cap. Her tone changed, dripping with defiance. "You can't kick me out anyway. My name is on the lease. I live here. I get my mail here. I have rights. Tenant rights." She said it like a weapon. She smirked, certain she'd cornered me. In that moment, I understood exactly what she intended to stay, to make herself untouchable, to drain what she could while she searched for something better. I looked her in the eye. "We'll see about that." The days that followed turned my sanctuary into a battlefield. Taylor shifted tactics as if she were playing roles on stage. One morning, she asked what I wanted for breakfast, wearing the same apron I'd bought her last Christmas. That night, she blasted music until 2 a.m., laughing with friends who sprawled across my leather couch, leaving greasy pizza boxes on the marble counter. She brought strangers home. One evening, I walked in after work to find a man named Todd lounging on my sofa, feet on my coffee table, sipping my beer. "Get him out," I said. "Don't be a jerk," she rolled her eyes. "This is Todd. We're just hanging out." "I don't care if he's the Pope," I answered coldly. "Get him out of my apartment." That fight was volcanic. She screamed that she could invite anyone she wanted because this was her place too. I stared at the contract in my mind, the lease I had read a dozen times, and realized she had made her mistake. The next morning, I drafted an email to Mr. Henderson, the landlord who had owned this building for 40 years. Old gruff, allergic to drama. I attached the lease, highlighting the sections about disturbances and unauthorized long-term guests. His reply came within the hour, blunt as a hammer. Any further complaints will result in a notice to cure or quit. 3 days to fix violations or both tenants vacate. Taylor thought she had the upper hand. What she didn't know was that the rules she leaned on cut both ways. But the chaos didn't stop. She craved attention not just from me, but from anyone willing to watch. She began live streaming our apartment, filming the skyline from the balcony, panning across the modern art on the walls, the oak dining table, the wine rack I had stocked carefully. To her audience, she called it our place. One night, I discovered something worse. An email left open on the shared computer. It was to her closest friend with a subject line that still makes my skin crawl. "I'll secure the apartment, then I'll find someone richer." My hands trembled as I read those words. Secure the apartment. As if my life's work, my home was just a prize in her strategy. I printed the email and folded it neatly into a folder along with Mr. Henderson's reply. Evidence. Proof. But what they didn't know was that this battle had only begun. That week, her sister texted me, "What's going on, Taylor? Says you're being controlling." I didn't reply. I didn't need to explain. The truth would surface on its own. Taylor paraded around the apartment smug, daring me to react. Every slammed door, every smirk, every stranger's laugh at midnight was fuel to my resolve. I kept silent, storing my anger like a banker stacking bills. Revenge like money is best collected patiently. Tell me in the comments. Have you ever lived with someone who turned your home into chaos? Don't forget to subscribe. I thought maybe the storm would quiet if I ignored it. But silence in a family like Taylor's only invites more noise. A week after the graduation fiasco, her mother called. "We're having Sunday dinner," she said. Her voice held that tone of politeness sharpened into a blade. "You'll be there, won't you? We need to talk." I went. Not because I owed them anything, but because I needed to see the lines drawn. Their house smelled of rosemary chicken and expensive candles. The table was set with crystal glasses and silver polished until it gleamed. Yet beneath all that shine was tension thick as smoke. Taylor sat beside her mother, smiling too brightly as if rehearsed. Her father poured wine but never looked me in the eye. Halfway through the meal, her father cleared his throat. "Alex," he began, "you've always been generous. But don't forget, this isn't just your place anymore. Taylor has built a life with you. That apartment will be part of our family one day." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. The apartment. My apartment, worth more than $2 million, suddenly claimed as a family heirloom by people who had never paid a dime toward it. Taylor leaned in, lips curled. "You're just a placeholder, Alex. You know that, right?" The room erupted in laughter. Even her sister giggled behind a napkin. Their voices clinked together like glass mocking, dismissing. I felt invisible, a stranger at a table I had paid for many times before. I didn't shout. Instead, I lowered my fork, gently folded my napkin, and stared at the centerpiece white roses in a crystal vase. The thorns hidden under petals reminded me of what sat quietly in my briefcase back at home. A folder with her damning email, the landlord's warning, the mortgage statement with my name alone. I excused myself early, claiming fatigue. They didn't stop me. Taylor smirked, triumphant, as if she had won. But what they didn't know was that their laughter had only sealed their place in the story I was writing. Over the next days, I gathered quietly. Screenshots of Taylor's live streams where strangers commented on their $1,000,000 view. Photos of beer cans and cigarette butts littering my balcony after her late-night parties. Receipts for damage, a broken lamp, a wine stain on the rug, scratches on the coffee table. Each piece slipped into the folder like cards stacked in a deck I would play at the right moment. One night, I walked into the bedroom and froze. Another stranger, a different one this time, was sprawled on the bed I had bought, scrolling through his phone. Taylor, sitting beside him, looked up casually. "This is James," she said. "We're just hanging out." I didn't argue. I didn't rage. I simply walked out, closed the door, and poured myself a glass of water. The folder sat on the counter. I slid another printed photo inside James in my bed in my home. My anger hardened into clarity. Betrayal, once clear, stops hurting and starts guiding. I knew what to do. The following Sunday, I received another message from her sister. "Why are you being so cold? Taylor says you're punishing her." I almost laughed. Punishment wasn't here yet. I kept quiet, storing my evidence, building my case. Revenge, like an investment, needs patience to mature. And patience was something I had in abundance. What? What would you have done at that dinner table? Stayed silent like me or spoken out? Drop your thoughts below and subscribe for what comes next. The invitation came as if nothing had happened. A neatly written card slipped under my apartment door. Join us for Robert's birthday dinner Friday at 7. Signed in her mother's delicate script. I stared at it for a long time. My instinct was to toss it into the trash. But then I looked at the folder sitting on my desk, stuffed with printouts, photos, and emails, and I realized this was the stage I needed. Some battles are won in silence. Others demand an audience. That Friday evening I dressed carefully. A crisp suit, polished shoes, and the leather briefcase carrying my folder. The restaurant they'd chosen was a grand place with chandeliers and velvet chairs, the kind of setting they believed made them look important. When I walked in, the family was already gathered around a long table. Taylor wore a red dress, laughing too loudly at something her sister said. Her father, Robert, sat at the head of the table with a glass of wine, raised a picture of pride. No one expected me to show up. The air shifted as I approached. Taylor's smile faltered. Her mother whispered something sharp under her breath. I pulled out the chair at the far end and sat, placing the briefcase gently beside me. Dinner began in forced cheer. Waiters brought plates of roasted lamb, glasses of expensive wine. They carried on as if nothing was fractured, but tension simmered. I waited quiet, sipping water while they performed civility. Then Robert lifted his glass again. To family, he said, his voice booming. To building a future together. And to Taylor, who has found her path in life. The table erupted in applause. Taylor leaned forward, soaking in the attention. That was my moment. I set down my glass, reached for the briefcase, and pulled out the folder. The leather snapped open like a gavel striking wood. Everyone froze. I slid a printed email across the table. This is what your daughter wrote, I said, my voice calm even. I'll secure the apartment, then I'll find someone richer. Silence. Taylor's eyes widened, her face draining of color. Her mother's lips parted. That's taken out of context. I laid down the landlord's reply next, the letter warning about disturbances and unauthorized guests. Here's what her parties have earned us: 1 violation away from eviction. Your daughter's friends treat my $1 million apartment like a hostel. Gasps fluttered around the table. Taylor reached for the papers, but I pulled them back. Not yet, I said, my tone cutting. Then I set down a photo. James sprawled in my bed, grinning at his phone. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. The silence was suffocating. Robert set his fork down slowly, staring at the evidence spread before him. The proud man of the hour now looked small. Finally, I leaned back, letting my words fall like stones. So this is how you raise your daughter, planning to inherit my $1.2 million home while laughing at me as a placeholder. No one laughed now. Taylor's smirk returned, but it trembled at the edges. You can't prove anything. My name is on the lease. I'm not going anywhere. That was when her cousin, phone in hand, whispered a little too loudly. It's already online. He had been recording, streaming my confrontation in real time. A dozen faces turned toward their buzzing phones, notifications lighting up like fireflies. I hadn't planned that part, but it was perfect. The world was watching. Taylor stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. You think you've won, this is nothing. But what she didn't know was that her performance, her arrogance, had already gone viral. Strangers were typing comments faster than her family could defend her. I gathered the papers back into the folder, rose from my seat, and buttoned my jacket. Enjoy your dinner, I said quietly. And then I left, my footsteps echoing across marble, leaving behind their silence, their shame, and their birthday cake untouched. The night after that birthday dinner, I sat alone at my kitchen table, the folder open like a playbook. The city skyline stretched out beyond the window, but I wasn't admiring it. I was counting moves just as I had in finance meetings where millions of dollars shifted with a single decision. Taylor had laughed at me, claimed her rights, paraded strangers through my home. But I had something stronger than her, smirked the lease. I opened my laptop and typed carefully. Subject: lease question. Unit 14 amperes. My words were polite, professional, almost cold. I explained how my co-tenant had created disturbances, invited overnight guests, and turned our apartment into a stage for her performances. I attached evidence, photos of parties, screenshots of live streams, and a list of damages. I read the lease again, clause by clause. Section 7, Clause C, no guest permitted for more than 30 consecutive nights. Tenants responsible for their guests' behavior disturbances prohibited. I'd memorized those words like scripture. Mr. Henderson replied in less than an hour. His message was short. Violation confirmed. Next infraction will result in a formal notice to cure or quit. 3 days to remedy, or both tenants must vacate. Consider this your only warning. I leaned back, letting the weight of that sentence settle. The rules she bragged about had become the knife at her throat. The next evening, Taylor strutted through the apartment in front of her phone camera. Hey guys, she chirped to her audience, welcome back to our place. $1 million view, $1 million vibes. She spun the camera around, showing off my balcony, my art, my wine collection. Her followers dropped hearts and fire emojis feeding her hunger. I watched from the hallway silent. She thought she was untouchable. She thought her audience would shield her. What she didn't know was that the landlord had already seen her little show thanks to the evidence I'd sent. The knock came during her live stream. Sharp, commanding. She frowned, muted her phone and opened the door. A courier handed her an envelope stamped with the landlord's seal. She laughed nervously for her audience. "What's this?" she asked, tearing it open. Her face changed as her eyes scanned the words. "Notice to cure or quit. 3 days." I stepped into view, arms folded. Your guests, your noise, your live streams, they broke the lease. You wanted tenant rights, here they are. Her phone was still recording. The chat exploded with comments. "She's busted. Get out, girl, it's over." Imagine losing $1 million place live on stream. Taylor's hand shook. "You set me up." "No," I said quietly. "You set yourself up. I just made sure the world could see it." She slammed the envelope down, but the damage was done. Screenshots of her shocked face spread faster than she could delete them. By midnight, memes had popped up online, her wide eyes under captions like, "3 days left and tenant rights gone wrong." Her family called in a panic. Her sister begged me to reconsider. Her mother accused me of cruelty, but I didn't answer. I poured myself a glass of wine, the kind I usually saved for holidays, and sipped slowly as the city lights blinked outside. But what they didn't know was that this was only the beginning. Revenge wasn't finished. It had just found its voice. The next 3 days stretched long, but not for me. For once, I felt calm. My mornings were steady again, coffee in the kitchen, the quiet hum of the city below. The only sound that broke the peace was Taylor's frantic pacing across the hardwood floor. She tried everything. First came the charm. She cooked breakfast one morning, eggs, bacon, toast arranged neatly on plates. She smiled, her voice sugar-coated. "We can work this out, Alex. We don't have to let a piece of paper ruin us." I set down my mug. "It's not a piece of paper. It's a contract. And you broke it." Her smile cracked. By afternoon, she was calling friends, begging them to let her stay. By evening, she was on her phone again, live streaming to anyone willing to listen. "Guys, you don't understand," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "I'm being kicked out of my own home. I'm the victim here." The chat didn't agree. Comments scrolled faster than she could keep up. "It's his place, not yours. You played yourself. Imagine thinking you can scam your way into $1 million apartment." She slammed her phone down, the clatter echoing off the walls. The following night, she tried a different tactic, defiance. She hosted one last party as if to prove she still had power. Music blared, people spilled wine on my rug, someone scratched the dining table. But it wasn't joy in their faces. It was the look of vultures circling, waiting to watch a spectacle. Halfway through, she pulled out her phone again, streaming live. "See, I'm still here. They can't touch me." And then came the knock. A delivery man handed me another envelope. I opened it, read it silently, and passed it to her on camera. Final notice. Eviction filed if violations not corrected. Her jaw tightened, her hands shaking as she held the paper in front of her audience. "This isn't fair," she whispered. But the world had already decided. By morning, the memes were everywhere. Her shocked face, her desperate words plastered across feeds. One showed her holding the eviction notice with the caption, "Tenant rights speedrun. Game over." Another had her crying into the camera under the words, "Placeholder problems." Friends stopped answering her calls. Invitations vanished. Even her own sister messaged me privately. "She's made a fool of herself. I don't know what to say." Taylor tried one last live stream, tears streaming down her face. "I loved him," she cried. "I did everything for us." But even that fell flat. The comments were merciless. "You love the apartment, not him. Pack your bags. 3 days up, girl." I watched from the hallway unseen. It was strange, almost sad, to see someone unravel in real time. But betrayal demands consequence. On the third evening, she packed, slowly, bitterly tossing clothes into suitcases, muttering curses under her breath. No one came to help her. The same people who had crowded my living room for her parties were nowhere to be found. She stopped by the door, at last, suitcase in hand, eyes red. "You think you've won," she said. I met her gaze evenly. "Number, I think I've finally gotten my home back." She left. The door clicked shut. The apartment fell silent for the first time in weeks. I walked through each room, the living room still faintly smelling of wine, the balcony littered with cigarette ash, the bedroom finally empty. I opened the windows, letting the cool night air wash through. It felt like rinsing poison from a wound. But what she didn't know was that her story wasn't ending quietly. The internet doesn't forget, and neither do I. The silence after she left felt almost unreal. For weeks, the apartment had been alive with noise, her voice, her friends, the clatter of bottles, the glow of her phone camera. Now there was nothing but the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant city traffic outside my window. I stood in the middle of the living room staring at the mess left behind. The rug still bore the faint outline of a wine stain. The coffee table had scratches deep enough to catch the light. On the balcony, cigarette ash clung stubbornly to the tiles. It wasn't just physical damage, it was the echo of betrayal embedded in the walls. I spent the weekend cleaning. Each sweep of the broom, each scrub of a sponge felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I replaced the rug, polished the table, aired out the rooms until the smell of stale smoke finally lifted. For the first time in months, I could breathe. Taylor's family stayed quiet. No calls, no texts, no invitations. After the birthday dinner debacle and the viral fallout, they had retreated into silence. Maybe it was shame, maybe anger, maybe both. Either way, it didn't matter. Their voices no longer reached me. But the world outside hadn't forgotten. Clips of her meltdown continued to circulate. I saw them sometimes by accident, her face frozen, mid-tier captions mocking her downfall. Friends sent me links with laughing emojis. I didn't laugh. I simply closed the screen. Revenge had been served. I didn't need to drink from the well again. What I did need was peace. And slowly it came. I returned to routines I had almost forgotten. Early mornings with coffee and the newspaper instead of arguments. Evenings on the balcony with a glass of wine, the city skyline steady and unchanging. I worked late at the office again, not to escape home, but because I wanted to. My home was mine again, and that truth was enough. Still, there were moments of emptiness. You don't spend years with someone, even a betrayer, without feeling the hollow after they're gone. Some nights I lay awake, listening to the quiet, wondering how I'd missed the signs earlier. But regret is a useless currency. It buys nothing. Instead, I turned my focus to the future. I met with my financial advisor, reviewed investments, even considered purchasing another property. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. My life was mine to build, and I wouldn't hand the keys to anyone who saw me as a placeholder. One afternoon, while sorting through old papers, I found the folder, the same one I had carried to her father's birthday dinner. I opened it, leafing through the evidence. The email, the landlord's warning, the photos. Proof of betrayal once so heavy now felt like old receipts. I slid them back inside, closed the folder, and tucked it into the back of a drawer. I didn't need them anymore. But what she didn't know, and maybe never would, was that her betrayal had done something unexpected. It had burned away illusions, left me sharper, clearer, almost stronger. Betrayal is a brutal teacher, but it teaches well. Weeks later, I walked past the restaurant where her family had celebrated that birthday. Through the window, I saw a table of strangers laughing, clinking glasses, living their own dramas. I kept walking. I didn't need to step inside. The past had had its stage. Now it was my turn to live quietly, steadily, without applause or mockery. And for the first time in a long while, I felt free. It has been months since Taylor rolled her suitcase out of my apartment. Time has a strange way of softening memories, but not erasing them. When I look back now, I don't feel the same sharp anger I once carried. Instead, there's a steady kind of calm, like standing on a shore after a storm has passed. Life has settled into something simpler. My mornings are quiet, filled with the smell of fresh coffee and the rustle of a newspaper. Evenings belong to myself again. I light candles, cook meals I enjoy, sit by the window, and let the city's rhythm move without me. The walls no longer echo with laughter that wasn't mine, or with music that drowned my thoughts. Silence, once painful, has become a friend. Taylor's name still appears online now and then. Screenshots of her live stream meltdown pop up in corners of the internet, used as cautionary tales or memes. Some people laugh, others pity. I don't add my voice. Her story is no longer mine to carry. What the world remembers of her is out of my control, and I have no interest in shaping it. Her family, once so loud in their judgment, remains silent. No calls, no visits, no cards slipped under my door. I suspect they want to forget the entire episode to bury it under polite smiles and polished silverware at their dinners. That's fine. I've learned that some doors once shut should stay shut. But the lessons linger. Betrayal, as cruel as it is, has a way of stripping away illusions. It forces you to see who you are when the mask is gone. I had thought of myself as steady, maybe even cautious, the kind of person who could build a life brick by brick and trust that others would respect it. Taylor showed me otherwise. Trust without caution is a door left unlocked. I don't hate her. Hate keeps you tethered. I've let go. What I do feel is gratitude, though not the warm kind. Gratitude for clarity. For knowing I can survive humiliation, laughter at a dinner table, betrayal written in an email. Gratitude for the reminder that wealth isn't just numbers in a bank account or bricks in a building, it's control over your own life, your own peace. A few weeks ago, I took a walk by the river. The air was crisp, the water reflecting the city lights. Couples passed by, families, joggers with earbuds. I watched them and thought of how quickly things can change. How someone can be beside you one moment and gone the next, leaving behind only echoes. And yet the river kept moving steady and unbothered. I realized then that I wanted to be more like that river, flowing forward, never trapped by what had already passed. I'm considering selling the apartment, not because I need to, but because I can. A new place, a fresh start, perhaps even in another city. Change doesn't frighten me anymore. It feels like an invitation. And so the chapter closes. The battles are done, the laughter of others has faded, and the apartment stands quiet. I'm not the placeholder, she mocked. I am the owner of my story, the keeper of my peace. Sometimes betrayal clears the way for real freedom.